UPN Narrator News has partnered with Adidas to bring you custom clothing for all occasions. The material is amazing and they have fits for all body sizes.
The myth that won't die. There's a story we tell ourselves about nations, a comforting one, that countries fail because they were unlucky, because history wronged them, because the West interfered, because borders were badly drawn, because the people never got a fair chance. And sometimes that story is true, but sometimes it's a lullaby we sing to avoid a harder question. What if a nation collapses, not because it was cursed, but because it refused to govern itself? Not because it lacked resources, not because it lacked people, not because it lacked international sympathy, but because it made choices again and again and again. This episode is about one of the clearest case studies of that uncomfortable reality on Earth today. Two societies, same region, same people, same language, same religion, same colonial scars. One built a state, the other dissolved into permanent crisis, outsourcing power to militias, ideology, and foreign babysitters. And now a single diplomatic decision has dragged that contrast into the light. When Israel recognized Somaliland, it wasn't just recognizing a territory, it was recognizing capacity, and by doing so it exposed a lie that the international community has spent 3 decades politely maintaining. The lie that all state failures are tragedies inflicted from the outside. The lie that sovereignty is something you deserve rather than something you demonstrate. The lie that ideology can replace institutions. Tonight, we're not doing vibes, we're not doing slogans, we're not doing inherited grievances, we're doing outcomes, we're doing security, we're doing law, we're doing governance, we're doing reality, because reality doesn't care who you blame, it only records what you build and what you let burn. When recognition is an autopsy, there are diplomatic decisions that feel ceremonial, flags, handshakes, carefully worded statements written by committees terrified of verbs. And then there are decisions that function like an autopsy. Israel recognizing Somaliland is not a gesture, it's a diagnosis. It forces an uncomfortable question into the open. Why did one society, emerging from the same collapse, the same region, the same culture, the same religion, and roughly the same historical wounds, manage to build something resembling a state, while the other collapsed into a permanent disaster zone ruled by militias, extortion rackets, and apocalyptic theology? This episode is not about who feels morally validated, it's about outcomes. And outcomes do not care about your intentions, your trauma, your slogans, or your preferred villain. Same people, same starting line. Somaliland and Somalia were not born strangers. They share the Somali language, overwhelmingly Sunni Muslim populations, clan-based social structures, colonial disruption, Cold War manipulation, the catastrophic collapse of the Somali Republic in 1991. When the central Somali state imploded, everything was up for grabs. No one forced Somaliland to succeed. No one forced Somalia to fail. What followed was not destiny. It was choice architecture. The moment of division, 1991. In 1991, Somaliland declared independence, not with fireworks, not with Western applause, not with instant recognition. It did so quietly, internally, and deliberately. No UN safety net, no NATO umbrella, no endless donor conferences pretending corruption was capacity building. Somaliland's leadership looked at the ruins and made a decision that now looks unfashionable but turned out to be decisive. Security first, politics second, ideology last. They disarmed militias. They negotiated with clan elders instead of trying to erase them. They built hybrid systems that reflected reality rather than fantasy. Meanwhile, the rest of Somalia fragmented into warlord territories, then slid into something far worse. The failure of imported states. Post-1991. Somalia became a laboratory for every failed international theory. Transitional governments with no authority, foreign peacekeepers with no mandate, NGOs replacing basic state functions, and eventually the rise of Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab did not emerge because Somalia was too Western. It emerged because Somalia had no state capacity. Extremism is not a culture, it's a business model that feeds on power vacuums. Where law disappears, armed theology moves in, and once it does, it strangles the possibility of governance. What radical Islamism actually destroys. Let's be very clear, because clarity is an act of respect. It is an argument against political Islam as a governing system. When religious absolutism becomes the organizing principle of the state, several things happen with boring consistency. Law collapses into scripture. Dissent becomes apostasy. Governance becomes impossible. Al-Shabaab does not build infrastructure. It does not educate. It does not administer complex economies. It taxes through fear. It recruits through despair. It rules through spectacle violence. That is not resistance. That is state cannibalism. And Somalia has been consumed by it. Somaliland's unglamorous success. Somaliland's story is not cinematic. That's why it's real. No charismatic strongmen, no revolutionary slogans, no new man ideology. Instead, functioning courts, local elections, peaceful transfers of power, a national currency, domestic revenue collection, security forces that answer to civilian authority. Is it flawless? No. Is it wealthy? No. Is it recognizably a state? Yes. That alone puts it ahead of dozens of internationally recognized countries. Berbera, trade, and the real world. States exist because they manage flows, goods, people, capital, violence. Somaliland understood this. The port of Berbera became a strategic asset, connecting the Horn of Africa to Red Sea trade routes. Contracts were honoured, security was enforced, predictability returned. This is what sovereignty looks like in practice. Not flags, not speeches, but reliability. Why Israel enters the chat. Israel does not operate on sentiment. It is a state forged in existential threat. It understands something many activists refuse to accept. A state either functions or it doesn't. Recognition is not charity. It is risk assessment. Can you protect diplomats, prevent your territory from becoming a launchpad for hostile actors, enforce agreements, maintain continuity? Somaliland increasingly can. Somalia, tragically, still cannot. So Israel's recognition is not ideological alignment, it's strategic realism. The myth of international legitimacy. International recognition has become detached from reality. Some recognized states cannot secure their capitals, cannot tax their populations, cannot prevent militias from ruling entire regions. Some unrecognized entities hold elections, maintain order, control borders. This exposes an uncomfortable truth. Legitimacy follows capacity, not declarations. Israel's move simply acknowledged what observers have known for years. The moral panic response. Predictably, this recognition triggered outrage. Accusations flew, betrayal, imperialism, destabilization, but notice something interesting. None of the critics could explain why Somalia still cannot govern itself after 30 years, why Somaliland managed to do so without recognition, why extremism thrives where governance fails. Instead, the argument collapsed into emotion. Emotion does not build states. The cost of ideological excuses. Somalia's tragedy is often narrated as endless victimhood, colonialism, the West, foreign interference, all real, all relevant, but insufficient. At some point, responsibility re-enters the room. Somaliland faced the same history. It chose differently. That difference now has consequences. What this means for Africa. This is not a Somali story, it's an African one. It asks a dangerous question. What if statehood is not guaranteed? What if governance must be demonstrated? What if sovereignty is earned, not inherited? That terrifies elites who rely on recognition while delivering nothing. The uncomfortable future. If Somaliland continues on this trajectory, recognition will spread, quietly, pragmatically, without applause, and Somalia will face a choice it has postponed for decades: rebuild the state, or continue outsourcing reality to armed mythologies. The end of pretense. Israel recognizing Somaliland did not create a divide. It revealed one side chose institutions, the other chose ideology, one built slowly, the other collapsed loudly, and the world finally is adjusting its behavior to match reality, not because it's cruel, but because reality always wins. Not right, not left, just real.